Go ahead and get started. If you would all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. We are looking for at the minutes of May 19th. What is the wish of the board?
Second.
All right. Any changes or comments?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
It's not really, it's really, we can talk about it later, but we do have an open motion on the table from last meeting, I think is accurate. No? That's in here. So we should either address that, but I'm pretty sure we have an open, but maybe I'm wrong. I believe we opened a motion for the policy,
We tabled.
Did we table it?
I think we tabled.
I thought we tabled
We tabled.
It needs to be added.
Under IKE?
Yes, IKE, that's the one. And that was gonna go back to the administration to talk about. Did we,
It was Jeff and Nate,
to table it?
the motion.
The motion, right? I think we did table it, but
We did
should
table
specify
it.
that.
So we just need to note that. Okay,
That was the one I saw.
all right. Is that it? Anything else? All in favor of submitting the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Brings us to public comments. Anybody here that has from the public with a comment? None? Okay. Agenda review, let's see. Public comments, just want to make sure. All right. Agenda review, I do have one item I'm going to add under G, which is just a brief request regarding the outdoor classrooms.
So H, you mean?
H. Anything else from the board?
Yes.
What do we got?
Under number 10, you have 4 items. And in non-public, we'll be entering under letters B and C.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. And we don't have any consent items?
No.
Okay. I do not recall receiving any correspondence over the last week. Anybody else got anything? No. All right. That brings us to facilities projects. Ms. Willie, what do you have? Australia?
Right, so Mr. Kufos has been collecting some quotes for the painting project, the carpet project in the library, and the fascia board to work on this summer. I do have, he met with several carpet companies, and do you want me to just read off to you the amounts, or would you like to proceed? I have.
Yeah, how many do you have?
Okay, so I have 3, one from ADF Flooring, one from Paul White Company, and one from Tri-City Flooring. The ADF Flooring, he asked for 2 quotes from them for high-end carpeting as well as mid-level carpeting. ADF Flooring was a recommendation from Josh at Pinkerton. They use this, not Pinkerton, Pembroke Academy. Sorry, the other PA. And also they've used them at Concord High School. And so the high-end carpet was $18,663 and the mid-level carpet was $17,248.
Okay.
Paul White Company came in at $18,500 for high-end carpet and $15,500 for mid-level carpet. This is a commercial company out of Maine. There's a small price difference. And then Tri-City Flooring is a local company out of Somersworth that he's waiting on pricing for. He had asked for them to do high-end and mid-level, and they had only given him one, so he went back to them.
So when we discussed this, we set some money aside for the library, and that was part of it. Did we set enough aside for the
You set aside, your guesstimate was about $15,000.
for carpet?
So you weren't too far off.
All right, so, that being said, is there a request from Chris to,
He would like to go with ADF Flooring,
okay,
which is, he met with them, all three companies came out here and did their work, and so it's just a matter of whether we want the high-end carpet at 18.6 or the mid-level carpet at 17.
can you give me any indication of what, is there a different lifespan expectancy, or,
He did mention that, yeah, there is a little bit more, it's just durability,
okay,
essentially what it comes down to.
so is there a request for one over the other?
I think he was looking to do the high end,
Okay,
just because of what other schools are doing.
okay. So it sounds like we have a request to allow 18,663. We've already set aside 15, so we'd be setting aside an additional 3663 on top of what we had set aside. Everybody, does that math make sense to everybody?
Yep.
All right, so I'd look for a motion to set aside another 3663 for the library carpeting and to award the work to ADF.
So moved.
Motion by Jeff, do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Andy, do we have any additional discussion regarding this? Nate?
Did you check the references, or did Chris check the references? So you said PA and also Concord, I mean, you said, did you talk to PA?
He talked to
Josh, the
Josh, the
facilities.
facilities.
Okay, and you just heard it through Josh, or did you talk to Concord? I mean, you've had good, as far as we know, good experience.
I mean, all I know is that he did speak to Josh, and Josh is very qualified at what he does.
Yeah.
For sure.
And they can fit it in the summer
Yeah.
within our timeframes?
They're actually looking to have it done by around July 4th.
Oh, all right, so materials obviously in that.
We're working with existing promo, Pro Patch, Supreme prep work, apply primer to floor, Mohawk Dynamo carpeting, install carpet, it's actually carpet tiles that we're installing,
Yep.
so that if we need to replace, we can just
You can peel it
take
off.
out tile. Pinless tack metal, vinyl transition, 4x4 cove base, and installing the cove base.
Okay.
It's a full scope of work.
Sorry, Andy, I didn't see you.
Is this post shelving removal? I know we're talking about doing some work to the library, so the shelving. Okay, cool.
Everything's coming out.
This will go wall to wall.
It'll go wall to wall.
Perfect.
Okay. Nate?
And even if it's July 4th, is it still on this calendar year, this fiscal year?
Yes, we have to have the work scheduled by June 30th.
Any additional questions? All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
All right, next one was painting. So you heard from CertaPro Painters, recommended by the facility director in Bow. He came in at 13,750. Then Cornerstone Painting Company came in at 18,680. And a company Tuxedo Painting came in at 20,000.
This is for the painting of the second floor.
Correct.
Hallways, all the way around.
Correct, and
as well as
doors.
the doors. So what we did downstairs last year,
Correct.
upstairs.
Does not include the stairwells.
That was,
That was
Walls, window
phase
frames,
3.
door frames, wall boards, walls, doors, in hallways, both hallways 1, 2, 3, 4 on the second floor. He came in with the CertaPro Painters is the one he's
asking
recommending.
for, okay.
He came in with a high grade Sherwin-Williams top of the line paint. They all did, but this particular, the CertaPro Painters provided a detailed scope of work, provided a price for a better paint than he had requested, and the price was still $5,000 less than the other two quotes.
Okay, yeah, we set money aside already for painting as well. What do we set aside for that?
I think we are getting around the 15,000 mark.
Okay,
I believe.
we don't need to take action for this, set money aside in that case, or?
No, I would just approve the amount and the vendor, and leave it all set.
So yours is for Servpro?
Servpro painters, yep.
All right, look for a motion to award the painting to Servpro painters for $13,750. Moved by Nate, seconded by Andy. Any additional discussion? All in favor?
I'm gonna abstain from that one.
Okay, so it's 3, 1 abstention. All right,
And then the fascia board, he had spoke to two contractors, Jasmore Construction, out of Loudon, came in at 11,500. He had suggested 8,000, Chris had suggested about 8,000 to get that job done.
okay.
And CK Landmark, he's still waiting on a price, they promised a price today and he never received anything from them. So he would like to go with Jasmine Construction, they came out, they met with him, they listened to what the needs are of the school, made some suggestions themselves about what they could do, and,
What, did he indicate what they were gonna use for materials?
We talked to all PVC composite
Okay.
when I don't know if this is recorded, but that's what Chris and I had discussed.
so Jasmine says they're gonna tear off one layer of the existing white siding, all 3 gables, inspect sub-sheet sheathing for damage, apply the new CDX half-inch sheathing in place of areas not sufficient, apply a new white finish aluminum trim, custom fabricated on site to wrap all 4 windowsill contouring, apply new PVC bevel lower ledge plate, certainty PVC, hidden fastener system to complete the white finish drip cap, signage codes, questions, all done. So those are the,
Yeah, all that, Mr. Builder?
sense, do you wanna look at this?
No, I'm good. I think the thing that we should be aware of is I have a feeling there's gonna be quite a bit of rock we're gonna run into, and so we're gonna get change ordered on this one if I had to guess. So what we're approving is gonna be under what actually ends up happening.
Once they tear into it.
Yeah, the sheathing's rotten behind it. I mean, I could be wrong, but
It needs to be fixed, is ultimately what it boils down to, is we need to address it and
Yep.
eliminate what is gonna eventually work its way into a bigger problem.
correct.
Okay.
But I just,
So we have a starting point, go ahead, Andy.
Do we make a motion to approve up to a certain amount just to get the project started and then keep going so that it doesn't have to come back or no?
You really can't because
Because we
you
have
have
to
to match the
contract
quote for the PO accrual because year end is coming.
So I think what ends up happening is if we find out that we're getting change ordered, we're gonna just have to address it in the next budget. Which, I mean, at the end of the day, we might be talking for rot repair, Jeff, another what, $3-4 grand, depending on how bad it got.
yeah, with the way it is.
So, at the end of the day, it's not like there shouldn't be $30 million worth of repairs there, right? It should be, but deferring it only is just gonna make it worse when we finally get it.
In our contracts with contractors, do we have a limiting amount on how they can do their change orders? For example, like, they have to show us their labor material costs and they're only allowed to mark up 10%.
I would doubt in these small projects that we would. I think we typically get the bids and then go with that. I
Yeah.
don't think we typically have a full-fledged contract.
All right, so at the moment, we have a request to award Jasmine Construction, a contract for 11.5 to replace the failing fascia board on the front peaks of the building. For a motion,
So moved.
look for a second.
Second.
Moved by Jeff, seconded by Nate, additional discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that it?
That's it, there were 2, the RFP for the fire alarm panel, do we wanna?
I think they just came this afternoon, so I don't think people have had a chance to look
Okay.
at it yet.
I wanna let that one rest for
That's
a chance to
perfectly
review
fine.
it.
Because that's coming from the trust, we've already decided, it doesn't need to be decided.
Yeah, that's not a, right, so we,
We will make sure they get put in the drive and then you can take the next 2 weeks to look at them and
can you have, I didn't even check, but if there isn't a copy of that bid in the drive, And then put them in drive as well in scope, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that should button up our facilities. Is that correct, Principal Willie?
Yes.
We are now on to our social studies curriculum. And who is joining us?
Lindsay Maxfield, fifth grade. Is there a way to project on there?
I'm sure there is, but I'm not
Or, Chris, can I
technologically
just share
savvy.
with you?
Yeah, you can share with me.
Okay, I'll just share
Not
with you.
Zach's area of expertise.
Not my area of expertise.
I'll just share with
And I can run home and grab one of my kids if we need some help, but
you. Not a problem.
that's, it's usually how I solve these problems at home.
Yeah, thanks.
So I am the chairperson of the social studies committee, and I'm here to present our curriculum for the next 7 years recycled. So I'm just gonna, I kind of created a document that shows the highlights without giving you all the nitty-gritty. These are the contents of the document. The ones that are underlined are the ones that are unique to this document, with the exception of the appendix and references are definitely unique. The competency-based education and grading system are the consistent pieces to all our curricular documents here at DCS. So, sorry. A lot of text, I do apologize, I just didn't want to parcel down anything that didn't need to be parceled down. This is our social studies rationale, kind of some consistencies to the previous document. Nothing has changed on the state level since we had put the previous social studies curriculum document in place. Right now, the state document is 2006. They did have some work done to revise their state document. However, with the pandemic happening, things kind of slowed down to a near stop. So we do know that this document itself in the revision process will have some major revisions coming up through this process to incorporate anything new that has come from the state level. I don't want to change it if you guys aren't ready for me to change it. It's very text heavy.
Very good.
Okay, yes? All right. Guiding principles, sorry, not my device.
Do you want me to do that for you?
If you want to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm gonna knock it right off the cart. So we've got 3 basic guiding principles. One is to participate in inquiry-based education. We do know, and thanks to Chris and his connections, we do know on the state level that the new state document that is being hashed out right now, it does have a big component of the C3, which is an inquiry-based model for college, career and civic life education. So we made sure that this document incorporated more of the inquiry language just to make sure that we are bridging what we know is going to come, definitely. So we put more in there regarding supporting questionings and how to get the kids to make those connections, evaluating sources, which are all part of the C3 4 dimensions. The next one is becoming participants in a diverse, complex, and global society, which is even more important due to the current world climate. So we have in there demonstrating empathy towards backgrounds, cultures, and contexts, thinking beyond their local and looking at more global citizens, looking at personal strengths and challenges, using resources and artifacts, kind of making that more globally aware piece. And then the third one was becoming more social scientists, becoming more active in their learning, having them kind of ask those questions, categorize their evidence, find all their supports, making their judgments based on what they find. And then if you go to essential environment, as I say, competency-based and are consistent with our document. These have descriptions within our document, again, unless you want to read every nitty-gritty. We did break down our essential environments and our essential actions through these components, and a lot of these are consistent from the previous document. But we did kind of beef them up to reflect the inquiry piece, more of the active participation in their learning. That one work? Oh, perfect.
Just, I was just getting time to.
The competencies, I didn't include every single performance indicator, but we do have the competencies listed. We kept the primary the same as they previously had. So they're still using the geography, conflict and cooperation, civic ideals and practices, and cultural and technological contributions. We do know that eventually they are going to need to shift, but where there isn't an active document to use as a model and to be able to look at those categories, and looking what is already in place and what we're kind of shifting towards over the last 13 years, 14 years. We kept those in place for the primary for now, knowing that in a couple of years when there is a revision on the state level, there may need to be more of a revision on the primary level. The intermediate and middle school has made this shift. These are the 4 criteria that are in the dimension 2 of the C3, geography, history, civics, and government, and economics. Economics isn't something that we've really had here at DCS, so we know that that is also going to change over the years as we get more guidance on the state level. But we did feel like it was important for us to start incorporating those competencies here at DCS and not just wait around making that transition ourselves.
Sorry.
That's okay. I appreciate it.
No, the scope and sequence is out there, okay.
And then the scope and sequence, just to give you an idea of where we're kind of going with this, grade level spent some time looking at their primary focuses, and we realized that in the primary, we kind of kept the same themes as we had in previous documents, where kindergarten is really all about them. The theme for first grade is my family and me, and the theme for second grade is community. And so looking at those, third grade is Native Americans in the regions, 4th grade is New Hampshire, and 5th grade early American history. And the middle school has the units, as they've worked extensively with Chris Matika over the last year and a half to develop the units that we're going to be focused on for 6th grade. In the appendix, you'll be able to find the rubrics. That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. You can actually look at there if you want to go to the, oh, no, that's okay.
Okay.
If you click on one of those, you'll see the actual rubrics.
What about second grade?
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Okay.
And then just pop it out. So these were put, and we heard that the transition to put the rubrics more in the appendix form and have the meat of the curriculum stand for itself. We have all of these based on the competencies for each grade level throughout the document. So these will be found in the appendix. And really what we did was we tweaked and revised. It hasn't been that long since we've done these rubrics, but knowing that there is a little bit of a shift in over the last couple of years, we wanted to tweak and revise them to reflect the meat of our document. And then the references we used, we still have the C3, which is that top one, college, career, and civic life frameworks, which is where we got the dimensions and our competencies. They do have grade spans in there, but it's really not so much of what content is taught when, it's more of the skills. We kept the social studies curriculum framework, again, even though it's from 2006 and has not been revised. We used Inquiry Ed as part of our references because a year and a half ago, we did staff workshop on how to build inquiry within the social studies context. So we gave grade level times to build an actual inquiry unit, working on questioning. And then I also included the New Hampshire Historical Society, which is the most on the loose. It's their own curriculum right now. And they're trying to update their references as much as they can with still waiting for the state level to revise theirs. And through recommendations based on readers at CRB, I had gotten 2 book recommendations that were presented to me by one of the readers that helps with the developing questioning and developing inquiry. If you want to hold them up, you can. They're back there if you want, Kelly, right behind you.
Oh.
You can be the fan of white. So I went ahead and I had these orders so I can look at them this summer, and if they're definitely good resources, then I'm gonna try to kind of predict having a book group and try to get that inquiry part really kind of beefed up in the school.
Excellent.
Questions, I guess?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The guiding principles?
Yep.
Did you say, I kind of missed what you were saying there, did you say that came from the 3C, did that come from the state, did that come from you?
That came from part of resources, that came from committee. It really just came from everywhere. As we were using the resources, as we were looking at them, we said, oh, we really like the way they worded this and how they framed this. So that ended up being put into the guiding principles. So it's really a melding from different resources that we've used.
To what extent right now would you say that inquiry, it's a guiding principle, I think, it comes out pretty clearly in the guiding principle.
Right.
To what extent at this point do you say that we're doing this at the school?
I can speak on my grade level specifically. We are definitely asking more of those big essential questions. We as a grade level are trying to figure out how to ask better questions and get the kids to be more actively, taking on that role. And I think that's where we need to be at the staff right now. Once we know that this is the place that we're going to and is really becoming a part of our essential curriculum, we need to give more of that PD for that. We started a year and a half ago when we introduced the C3 and the different levels. And that was based on a state workshop that I had done at the Historical Society that had a template on asking the essential questions, how to provide the questions that they come up with, how to get to where you need to go and how to take informative action based on that. So we have introduced it to the school. We do need more work on it, and part of that is reading those books, getting to see if these are good resources to be able to push out to the staff to help us get to that piece.
And one moment. Is I'm hearing that there's a lot that didn't change, a lot of sort of carryover. You cited something that was still unchanged from 2006. I don't know if you said the document's not changed from 2006.
It's the competencies for primary has not changed.
If you were to look at this versus sort of this updated version for over 7 years ago, what are the top 3 changes that you would say?
So the top changes are really the competencies. When this original document that we worked off of, we didn't have competencies. It wasn't written with competencies. And so that is a huge change for us when it comes to us revising this document, is to incorporate those and have those be the driving force. We didn't change the primary because we need more guidance. I mean, we know that economics is going to be something that is going to come through, probably on the primary level. We don't know what that looks like because we don't have a state framework to build off of the economics piece. But we do know that probably within the 3 years when we hit our mid-cycle revision, there's going to be more out there, which we're going to be able to then adapt.
And so with this change, with the existence of competencies now, do you feel like you are seeing instruction changing as well to align rather than competencies, okay, but we're still going to do the same stuff we were doing before?
I think what it did was when we were preparing this revision, we put it back on the grade levels and we pulled out the grade spans that were originally in the state frameworks. We pulled out the Common Core grade spans for skills. We pulled out what the original document had, and we said to grade levels, okay, here's what you've had in place. You've obviously made some changes over the years. Where has your changes come? And then we had to match those changes up to the competencies. One thing that we are going to do if and when this document does get approved in the next step, and it was kind of spearheaded by the middle school, is looking at each of the competencies and saying, okay, in this unit, we hit this competency and this is how. In this unit, we hit this competency and this is how. To kind of give more of a tool or resource for a new teacher, changing teacher. We didn't go to that step yet because 1, of time, and 2, because if this doesn't get adopted, then that's a lot of work that will still have to be redone. So there are definitely avenues that we plan on doing and adding to this document to make it more user-friendly for new staff or changing grade levels.
Additional questions? So in the past, we have, in some instances, we've approved the curriculums the nights they've been presented. In other instances, we've left them on the table with an opportunity to review and come back. Is there a motion to either approve as presented or to hold and review?
Move to adopt it as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Motion by Nate, seconded by Jeff. Any additional discussion?
I think it looks great. Good updates and consistent with best practices and literature and nice job.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
It's approved.
Chris, you'll have these so you can make changes.
And thanks to Lindsay, she really has taken this on. We lost a social studies teacher, as you know, this past year, and she's taken on a huge part of this work, and we really appreciate her doing that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right. Chris, I believe you're up next.
Up next?
Oh, I can do it. Yeah. Hi, so I want to thank everybody for having me here. Thank you to the board. Tonight we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about competencies, as Lindsay just kind of gave us a nice little intro, and really talk about how we're shifting some practice. And the primary reason that we're doing that is really because of 3 years of conversation, or 2 years of conversation, give or take, some feedback that we've received from parents, from students, from teachers. And we think, as a staff, that we can do this a little bit better. So we're going to be talking about a shift in how we grade or how we report competencies, really more than anything. So as I mentioned, this has been years in the making. It's been 2 years since we've been talking about what's working and what's not, because we shifted to Alma 3 years ago. So we had to give it a year to kind of see what's happening. And then we've continued to have discussions and look at our work and consider what our next iterations are. What makes the most sense for students? What makes the most sense for parents? And what makes the most sense for teachers? We've been doing some data gathering, which I'm going to get into in just a second. And more importantly, I think we've evolved our thinking. And we've been able to look at what's happening, what feedback we're getting, and say, I think we can do better for our community. So the last time I got to talk to you guys was back in August, I believe, and we were talking about some student data that Ms. Sherman and I collected last January, like a year and a half ago, because we were finding that students we found a lot of students were on probation. A lot of students weren't necessarily doing homework. And so we kind of came in and we wanted to look at why is that happening? What are students' perceptions about why that's happening? And we talked about the fact that, when it comes to teenage minds, and you remember I said this, right? What teenagers are necessarily always intrinsically motivated to do work. Right? There's a lot of other detractors that can take away from their desire to do work. Now, that's not saying that's always the case, because right here, we'll see that there's a large number of students, in fact, the largest number of students who are self-motivated, who do the work because it's the right thing to do, because it betters their situation, because they want to learn. But clearly, when we listen to teachers and the data that they're providing, we're seeing that there are some kids who aren't doing their work, and it's a consistent issue that they're finding. And when we look at the reasons why, we know that their big motivators are they don't want to get in trouble with their parents, right? They don't want to get bad grades. They want to be involved in extracurriculars. And they certainly don't want to be on probation. And we talked a lot about probation the last time. So what you'll see is that students, again, I'm speaking in very big generalizations. I hope you know that. That some students are not all that motivated to do some of the things that teachers need them to do in order to demonstrate competence. So we took some time, and in January, we took the grades. We had a good cross-section of data from Alma, and we shut down the system in late January. We said, you know what? Parents can't get in, students can't get in. Only people that can get in are teachers and administrators. And we shut the system down and we started to look at different calculation methods, because we thought that might in fact be the issue. It could be the way that we're calculating grades that's not letting us get a true picture of what students know and can do. So we basically set up a bunch of different calculation methods, everything from the power law, which is some big giant mathematical formulation that's really impossible to understand. And it's all based on predictive measures. We looked at decaying averages. We looked at means and modes across numbers of assignments, and all kinds of calculation methods. I think there were 5 or 6 that we looked at. And every time what we were trying to do, and I asked teachers in every case, think about what your students know and can do. You know your students. It's very rare that they surprise us after a month or 2 of school. Okay, when we know what their work looks like, we get a pretty accurate representation. So we wanted to see how can we present that to parents. So what gives us the best picture of learning? We also listened to teacher feedback. And then after January, after that meeting, I went back and I built a system in Alma that kind of got as close to what we want or what they requested as possible. And so in March, we met again. We talked about this different model, which I'm going to show you in a second. But we also talked about making sure that we stayed on vision. Because we know that in a competency-based system, we have the ability to break down a content area so that we know if a student is a good writer, but they struggle with reading, we know where to target our instruction for them. If a student is good in addition, but struggles in subtraction, we can break that down. So we didn't want to lose that key component of our vision of competencies. We want to make sure that we can target that key instruction to help students when they're struggling and to celebrate successes and to make sure we don't waste time when there are successes. If everybody gets it, we can move on. So some challenges that remains, and this comes directly from teachers in working during that meeting, is that there's a sense, a pervasive sense. Not everybody, but it's pretty clear in some cases that nothing counts. They're not seeing homework assignments, for example, being done, or certain classwork assignments, and that makes it really hard for them to say, yeah, these kids are ready to take the summative assessment. These kids are ready to move on. So without that evidence, it's really difficult to figure out what they're supposed to do, when they can move on. So it was kind of like this missing piece. And primarily the issue surrounded formative versus summative assessments. A lot of times people think that formative doesn't count. The big misnomer here is that it does count. It counts in the sense of if I don't get it and I don't see it and I don't see what you're doing well or not well, I don't know if you're ready for that summative assessment. So there was a disconnect. There was also a disconnect in the sense of habits of learning. And that's another issue that we're working through, but namely that those habits are the things like effort. Because effort is not the same as whether or not you understand competencies in math, right? Your ability to read is very different than, how well you work with others. So we got to make sure that those things remain separate. So it's a really clear delineation I want to make. There's also a sense, there was another challenge in that there was frustration over the calculation method and what a grade means. Now, when I say that, what we found, and this goes across other schools as well, I just had a conversation this afternoon at another school, where 2 students might get the same score, right? In your case, it might be progressing towards competence. But in one case, the student really is close to that meeting competence. In another case, they may not be very close. And teachers and students have a hard time to either recognize, like, hey, you're almost there, you've got it, and to give that student that hope and for that student to be able to see that, boy, they're really close, versus the student who is not yet close and to be able to say, hey, I really need you to step it up. I really need to see this evidence more so, or more of it. So there was that. And then also the simple fact that the way that grades are recorded on both assignments in Alma and on the report card is when you read something like progressing towards competence, some people struggle to know what that means. Now there's a key right there so you can read it, but oftentimes it's overlooked. And so we want to make sure that we clarify those issues, that we make this system as clear as possible. So what we did was we re-envisioned what the end result was. We looked at, and this is the back end of all the setup work, and we basically made some tweaks so that grades would be more clear to parents, to students, and to have teachers help students. The calculation method that we're using is a mean across all assignments. That is not a change. That is exactly what was in place before. We were using the mean to calculate grades, so it's an average. We based it before on those words, competent, progressing towards competent. Competence with distinction. We're gonna move towards a numbers-based system. So a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. So a 5-point grade scale. We've decided, because we want to, again, show when students are getting close to that next level or falling down below, we decided that we want to round to the 10th place in terms of having a decimal point. So what that means is if I take a bunch of reading assessments that address the same competency, right? That over time, those assessments are going to be averaged together to give a mastery calculation. That mastery calculation might be a 3.1 or a 3.6 or a 2.9, whatever it may be. So we want to round to the 10th place. Here's a big one. We're including a 0. We're including a 0. And this is because of that pervasive sense that nothing counts. We need to shift that. We need to change that. Now, for those kids who do their work, not an issue, right? Not going to be an issue. Their work shows up. They have the evidence that we can see what it is. But for students who are not doing work and whose parents don't necessarily see it, namely because it doesn't show up in ALMA is a calculation towards that grade, which gives them a false sense of, hey, my kid might be doing okay, when in fact they might not be. We wanted to change that. We want parents to know immediately that when a 0 is entered, something's missing. The caveat here, the big key point, and this is the whole idea of competency-based ed and staying on our vision, is that the work can always be redone, right? There's always hope that if a kid maybe couldn't do it one day, but says, you know what, I think I got it now, that they have the opportunity to do that work. We never want to take the hope out of this. But anyways, so what we've done is we've added a 0, and it basically says the student has not turned in work, and ergo, we can't assess them, we can't give them a score. But we've got it, it's going to count as a 0 because we want parents to see what this does and how it impacts a grade. We want students to understand how it impacts their grade. And then we've added our whole, we basically popped the rest of our scale on top of this. So you'll see that we had to basically give an insufficient evidence a score. It's a half a point. But that's when work is kind of incomplete. It's when work isn't done maybe to the extent that it should be. It doesn't give the teacher enough of a picture of what the student can do, but they did do something. And then the big question right now, and we can't do it in ALMA per se, but I'm trying to find some workarounds, is the idea of weighing formative assessments. It'd be a very lightweight. It's not out of line with what other competency-based schools do. And we're basically trying to see if we can make that work. I don't know if we can, we're working on it. That piece, if we didn't weigh them, if they just got added in and included towards the final grade, yes, technically speaking, they'd be considered summative, but that it moves us more towards a body of evidence, which is something that we've talked a lot about and that we want to work towards and explore, I should say. So what does this mean? We're staying on vision to the extent that we possibly can, right? We're also trying to really make a shift to make sure that the community, students, parents, teachers all understand what grades mean. We want people to be as engaged and involved as possible in understanding what their kids are doing or not doing, so that we can help fix that. We're also planning a strategic approach towards the next iteration, so looking at things like a body of evidence, exploring those ideas, and we're talking about planned regular PD around these concepts. I'll show you what a map of that looks like in a minute. In practice, so in a real basic sense, we're shifting gears. Like any business would do, like any worker would do, when something isn't meeting their customers' needs, we make a change. And I think it's important to note that it's a continual process. So we're gonna go with this iteration, and we wanna see how it's working. Just like we did before, we wanna collect data, we wanna collect feedback, we wanna understand what's happening, and if need be, we continue to move until we find the right fit for our community. And I think it's also important to know that, even though we're going to numbers, we are still focused on that level of performance. So a 4 is not an A. It's really important. It's not a translation to a 100-point system. A 4 means this. It means that a student can consistently and independently analyze and synthesize and evaluate concepts, right? A 3 is that they can apply it. They can do it consistently and independently. A 2 means they either need help, they can't do it consistently, or they can do it in familiar tasks. I can solve the same 3 math problems time and time again, right? But I can't expand, I can't transfer to something that's similar but different. And a 1 is like, you can't yet. So we're staying on point with that. That will remain, but you will see numbers in place of things. So our future, it's going to be aligned with competency-based education, competency-based practices. We're going to explore a body of evidence. I think if Alma can't function with the weights because it goes against CBE mindset, it'll help us explore that a little bit more, and we'll work through that. I have a few ideas that I've been mulling in my head that I'm excited to share with administration and with the staff. We've been talking about using grade level team time to really look at data, to support teachers, and to do so on a regular basis, to make sure that we're having data-driven discussions so that we can keep on point with all this work. I didn't even give you guys a chance to talk.
No,
I
you're taking away,
apologize.
no, I'll answer questions.
Sorry, I got on a roll.
Okay. And
So-
then the last one, I
Yeah.
think you skipped, was to include regularly scheduled.
Oh, yeah, so regularly scheduled PD, where we talk about deep and engaging inquiry-based strategies, talk about authentic learning and assessment. So this is a rough PD outline, so it'd be a month-by-month focus. It's not done yet, this is a draft based on ideas, but it's really gonna incorporate a lot of work that surrounds things like building solid rubrics based off that, the rubric that you saw, which is our SAU-wide rubric. Things like calibrating assessments, working together to understand like, okay, you're a social studies teacher, I'm a social studies teacher. Is a 3 for me the same as a 3 for you? Is that connection that we really need in our grade levels? Not saying it's not there, just saying it's work that we want to continue to focus on. Questions? I saw a hand up. Jeff?
Yeah, so a couple questions. The zeros for not turned in, is this something that parents are only gonna see at report card time? Is it gonna be a live feed?
Nope. If they log into their Alma portal, it will not show up as missing assignment like it has in the past. What it will do is it will show up as a 0. So the 0 is indicative of the work has been collected, it has been scored, and this child did not turn anything in.
This is kind of more of a hypothetical philosophical question, but I guess when you look at competency-based education, and when you talk about the kids, intrinsic motivation and all of that, it seems to cut against it when we say we're moving away from the era of worksheets and just pumping out work and memorizing facts, right?
Yep.
But when if a student has not turned in an assignment, but they're fully competent in the subject, it seems counterintuitive to penalize them for maybe not doing, because it's like, well, they don't need to do the work because they're fully competent. So
I have a big smile on my face right now.
Yeah.
Because that's a common misnomer.
Yeah.
You're right, but I want to shift your thinking just a little bit. If a student knows it and can do it, the teacher still needs evidence of it, right? The teacher may not need every single assignment focused on that competency, but the teacher still needs to have evidence. Because without that evidence, the teacher can't say, I know that you're ready for that assessment.
Yep.
I know that you're ready to move on. Make sense?
Yep. And one last question. So we're working hard on, it seems like, how to assess the kids and evaluate them accurately based on competency-based education. What are we doing professionally to shift from back when it was, 0 to 100 score and this is your worksheet? Are we also
it seems like a ton of work on how to assess the students, but what are we doing for the teachers on how to shift their teaching of the students?
So I'll let Brian, Kristen, even Lindsay, Kelly, whomever talk about, and Lisa talk about whatever's happened in the past. What I can say is that's why this month by month thing is set up, is to reinforce or to bring up new ideas. So there's that. I think from a pedagogical perspective, you heard Lindsay talk about inquiry-based strategies. A lot of that work is embedded in this, and that's the same type of work that helps shift people towards a competency, skill-based mindset. Yeah, and others, please chime in. Work that's been done towards helping people move towards a competency-based system.
I mean, we definitely kind of looked at it as less of those worksheets and checking off, yes, you can do it, your task is done, and more of like, how are you applying all this stuff that you're doing? And like Chris was saying, like, it's an ever evolving process. You always have to kind of look at what we're expecting from kids and what we're giving them for opportunities to demonstrate that. And so, yeah, you know, when I first started teaching, I'm not telling you how long this was ago, but yeah, it was a lot of, oh, check, they did this, so they got a 7 out of 10, great, move on. It's more of now, yes, now how are you gonna use this information to apply, and that's what we're looking at.
Kelly, go ahead.
I'm Kelly Hughes, I teach 8th grade science, and we're pretty heavy inquiry in my room. And I would almost say that, like from the evidence piece, so if it's inquiry, like a lot of the learning is, I'm like, my teaching model, like you say, evolving such, I am a teacher as coach, and I kind of provide them with resources that they need. But inquiry, you need even more evidence from them of their learning. That doesn't have to be, fill out this worksheet or, you know, write down answers to these questions. I have some students who haven't been successful with that, so if they can tell me in a discussion way, like this is what I want to do for my experiment, we conduct our experiment, and then they can report back to me just orally, that works. So we are moving away, at least in my room, from that, you know, worksheet, 7 out of 10, okay, you have a 70, carry on. But I do think like putting more of the learning and like exploration of the content, and then like kind of coaching them through making sense of the information. We need them to report on their discoveries even more, you know what I mean? So it shouldn't be in a worksheet, you know, match these things up, but we need that evidence like Chris is speaking to make sure that they're.
It could be a log of a conference that you had with a student. It could be a worksheet at times. Like there's all sorts of different evidence, and that's really the goal of this work. A lot of it's protocol driven, where things are really lined up and strategically placed where they should be to maximize student input, things like that. So it's all a part of this big puzzle. That's why I say it takes a long time. It's not a quick, hey, do this and you're done. It's a process.
Yeah. When I started, that was, you know, we had the NELMS report that we worked from, and we had a consultant coming in and meeting. We did a lot of PD work our first year around continuing to understand competency-based education and competency-based grading. And then we led that into the second year. This year we have our focus has more been with Chris on making it better, like you said, working towards the next iteration of how this works for families. We're trying to make it better for teachers, for families, and specifically for students. And I think we do have some students here.
Yeah, I know that an email went home eliciting some students to share what some feedback that they've already provided. And I don't know if I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if they would like to share, I think that's probably way more important than me standing up here and talking to the board.
So, Ms. Hughes, you want to give us a little background?
Yeah. So these are some student leaders from 8th grade. We have Olivia Verbal, the 8th grade president, and Emily Griffin, the vice president. And they really kind of drove a part of this shift, which is very cool for them. And this is a letter that was constructed by them, and maybe we can think about what they see as a vision of what then their viewers need aligns with this.
Yeah.
Maybe is kind of.
I think it's important before you begin to understand that they're representing the student body. They're representing their peers in this information that they included.
Right, and this letter was written in,
January.
January, yes. Where would you,
Do you want them to come up from front of the table, or do you,
If they're comfortable, that's great.
what do you,
I'll let you do it, break it. I'll let you break it. You break it by it.
Thank you for joining us, guys.
We use the 8th grade student government have struggled with an ineffective grading system for multiple years. And furthermore, the current grading system disables parents from seeing accurate pictures of how their child is doing in school. And we've gathered evidence and suggests the following changes to the grading system so that the future generations of DCS parents and students do not have to suffer with the same problems.
Our first suggestion is to create an incomplete indicator on ALMA. The current system only allows teachers to mark assignments received or not turned in. The addition of an option for incomplete will allow students and parents to see that the work has been submitted, but that it needs to be revisited by the student. For example, in the current system, if a student completed 6 out of 10 problems and submitted their work, it would be marked missing. The addition of an incomplete will give students and parents a more accurate picture of students' effort in school, and it would lead to considerably reduced anxiety of students and parents.
Next, we suggest using numbers 0 through 4 instead of letters NYA, NYC, PC, and AC, and that competency grades are averaged to produce a cumulative grade per class. In the current system, student report cards are an S. Students give a letter code grade for each competency, and some classes have 6 to 7 competencies. And this means that students and parents can see up to 7 letter codes for a single class. We middle schoolers have grades for 9 classes, and so that's 63 grades for us and our parents to try and make sense of. And if the competency entered into ALMA were numbers instead of letters, and the competencies were averaged, we'd be able to see, for example, 2.8 in science class, and this is a clear indicator that a student is competent across most areas in science.
Finally, we suggest that grade 0 be added to the current system. Currently, formative work is NA'd after we have taken a summative on the same material, and incomplete summatives remain marked incomplete forever. This is not helping students because it gives the idea that if we just wait, the work goes away, and that if we simply avoid doing a test or project, it'll have no negative impact on their grade. We can literally choose to do nothing and end up in high school next year. A grade of 0 would replace NAs for formative work that was never done. NA should be saved for kids who have an actual excuse, like an excused absence. A grade of 0 would also be used if 10 school days have passed, and a student still hasn't done their summative. This 0 can be replaced with an actual grade when the student does their summative, and until the student does the summative, this 0 will average into the grade as it should.
Excellent.
that sums it up, right?
Yeah, actually, that was.
You talk, we listen.
I know.
Better than what you did,
I
Chris.
told you.
Uh-huh.
Nice
They
job,
didn't even
ladies.
have a PowerPoint.
Excellent.
A, thank you. And it sounds like most certainly the efforts are being done to incorporate that. From your perspective as students, if you don't mind, if we can ask you a question. The previous grading system, as you mentioned in the letter, really didn't do justice to the kids that were applying themselves. And it definitely gave this false sense of completion maybe to the students that weren't fully engaged. So do you see this new method really helping to address a lot of those issues and to put a more fair grading system in across the board for all of the students? Nick?
Thank you very much for joining us. That's great. One of the things that we've been kind of wrestling with this whole competency thing over the years is that the original reason we switched from a single grade score to, you were talking about the 6 or 7 breakdown, different rows, I think is how it appears in ALMA. was that the idea was that we would be providing more targeted information to students and their families about which particular skills, let's say in science or in social studies, needed to be worked on. And so we actually did provide more information. The goal was that you as a student could then take the ownership to try to focus your attention on where the weaknesses were to strengthen the whole overall. Not just to make it more confusing, that wasn't the point, but it does sound like it did get more confusing. Do you feel like going back to this version, which sounds a little bit similar to what I had when I was in school, which at my high school we currently do, which is averaging it all into one score, and so there's one score on the report card. Do you feel like while that would be easier to understand, it's going to be less clear because you don't necessarily know which skills you're having a hard time with? And then so how do you feel like, I don't know, can you explain maybe what your thoughts on that change, whether that might be a better change from that perspective, or whether it might be less clear? I don't know.
I feel like maybe just for especially just in a general report card, it's just simpler to understand to just look at a single thing. But I do see what you're saying, to specify what could be worked on. So if there could be a way that both are kind of shown. But...
Yeah, sorry, can I clarify the goal? I just want to make sure that they understand the question and stuff too. So the ideal situation would be that you can see both. So you go on Alma and you see a cumulative language arts grade, but if you go within there, you can see the competency grades. And so for science, the 4 competency grades would be where that average would come from.
So they're still going to be there.
Well, so that's a potential next iteration. We want to explore that because we want to see what, as we look at just having the average competency grades, what that looks like, if that remains a pain point or not. So it's something we talked about it yesterday afternoon that we want to continue to explore as the fall kicks in, and as we get towards the first marking period. And I think it's something that we will want to look at that point.
So maybe for clarification, are you saying that in the fall, report cards are going to have a single number, or
No.
they're not?
That was not part of what we built.
That's what we just said. Okay.
Correct.
All right, maybe I have a few more questions.
That's the one thing that I think we couldn't kind of maneuver out of that, at least not at the present moment.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Any additional questions or feedback?
Yeah, I guess I do have a few more questions. So I don't know, so maybe I'm missing, so there are changes that are gonna be happening in the fall.
Yep.
It was that screen that can I go back and just see that screen? I guess I do have a couple more questions on that.
I'm assuming you mean this one?
But these are updates to all of them that are gonna be happening.
Yep.
I guess, yeah, so some of my questions are around so we're going back, it sounds like from the letters to 4 or 5 numbers. But I guess I'm hearing different things. This is for formatives, or this is only for summatives that are going to be showing them?
So we can't, Alma does not differentiate because again, it's built on a competency-based platform. And a true competency-based system, a really pure one. Formative assessment is for learning, it's not measured. That being said, because the system doesn't allow you to differentiate by type and weigh by type, there is 2 or 3 options that we can go with that would allow it to appear as though, and to make some formatives count. So what my thought is, and this came up, like I said, in my 3 o'clock meeting, is the idea that, and one teacher who's really starting just now to learn how to do this well, he said, I'm probably gonna count a couple per week, a couple of homeworks a week, or a couple of classworks a week until my kids really recognize that they've gotta do it because it counts, because it gives me the evidence I need. Teachers can always go back and uncheck it so that it doesn't count, or add it so that it does. And I think that's gonna be based on, that's again, part of that consistent practice that we wanna bring in and say, okay, how are we going to do this at a real procedural teacher level? What's gonna count? Because we've gotta find a workaround for that in the system, because we need kids to understand, it's important that we get that evidence. And shy of that evidence,
I mean, this is tying back to that dying on homework hill conversation that we've had God knows how many times. You and I have discussed it more than once. But this allows the teachers to place a value on the assignments
Correct.
when necessary.
Classwork, homework, quizzes, projects, tests, anything, which they can do now.
So then can you clarify for me what the single score is going to be? What, in terms of like a science grade, what is going to show up on the report card? It's still going to be, it sounds like it's still going to be 4 rows for the 4 competencies,
Yep.
but those competencies will be broken down by summatives targeting that particular competency
It will be-
for each quarter.
Correct.
And those 4, let's say, 4 summatives within that competency will be averaged into 1 score for that competency in that quarter or
Correct.
trimester.
Any assignment under life science
Yeah.
that has been marked as counts towards final grade will count, will average together underneath that competency
Okay.
for 1 grade. Everything under physical science will do the same thing. Everything under earth-space science will do the same thing.
And then the averaging is going to actually, you said it's going to 1 decimal place, so we are going to have basically 50 gradations, not a scale of 100, but it is going to turn into, I mean, theoretically, sort of a scale of 0 to 5, but with the decimal place, that's going to be a 50-point scale.
So if you look at, I always like Rick Wormelli's iterations of this, right? He talks about how having a 4-point system is better than having a 100-point system, right? And you look at just the sheer math.
Right.
The issue is this: you don't really need an indicator for all 50 of those levels.
Right.
What you really need is to understand that if a student is, let's say, a 3.2, it means they're working right in this area.
Okay.
They are consistently and independently doing some stuff. They're certainly applying, and at times they're analyzing and synthesizing the value.
Okay.
Again, maybe that's just my really simple brain thinking about it.
I like that, and in terms of reporting, I agree with that as well. But a teacher, is a teacher going to be assigning, let's say a student does a project and this student earns like a 2.7 on it, that's not gonna happen? It would
If
be-
the student gets a 2 based on
Yeah.
this definition,
Yeah.
they're assigning for that competency a 2.
Okay, so the grade on an assignment is going to be in those 1, 2, 3, 4, or 0.
Yep,
But the average will turn into a decimal place.
comes together, correct,
Okay, thank you, that makes more sense.
as a mastery calculation.
Yeah, awesome. And then one more question.
I got all night.
Yeah, no, thank you, I appreciate this. So this is following up a great conversation we had with Concord last week, or last meeting, where they were talking about how they're switching to our grading system. But now we're switching our grading system, that's kind of funny. But anyway, that's a different conversation. One of the things that I was excited about hearing from Concord is the conversation around kind of a plan from a student's perspective, meaning making, especially I thought the CRTC had a really exciting idea about how they are re-looking at their classes and curricula and focusing on what I guess I would characterize more as student agency. And that I think is a theme that's been coming up in the past in a few meetings that we've been talking about in different forums. One of them is we just talked about inquiry here, where I think inquiry is so powerful because it does give that student ace one way that we can value and recognize and hear a student's voice. And so I was really glad to see that at the end of your presentation and here, you're talking about how, and to hear from the social studies curriculum, how inquiry is kind of making its way into our instruction. So back to Jeff's question, we're talking about changing the reporting project, we're talking about changing grading, but if we don't also talk about changing instruction in the same breath, then we're missing, I think, a bulk of the competency-based education.
So we know that this year, we need to support teachers in taking those assessments that they have and either validating them through a really solid rubric that matches with our SAU-wide rubric. We know that we need to calibrate around that to some degree, and we know that we need to really look and if we look at a rubric, or as we devise a rubric, if we see that there's no ability for a student to do deep level work and get to a 4, we shouldn't be assessing it, right? We shouldn't, and so we've either got to revise that assessment, or we've got to not count it, because that can only hurt a student. So that's what a bulk of this year has got to be, until we get to the spring, where we start looking at those inquiry-based practices. When I talk about those inquiry-based practices, I'm talking about things that do, through the use of really strict protocols, which I mentioned a few minutes ago for Jeff. This is all about how do we ask the right questions, a QFT technique, using seminars and lecture bursts instead of worksheets and whole class talking, which I'm not saying people do here, please don't get me wrong, right? It's using strategies like learning murals and having students make meaning based on what they see in topics and taking those topics in different areas. I did that exercise with the 7th grade team last summer, and if I showed you, I could pull it up on my phone, if I showed you the amazing things that they came up with as teachers, were brainstorming things, and they're like, oh my God, I never thought about that. I never saw the connection until now. What an amazing learning experience, what a great way to pull in students to build in what they love, or an area that they're like, oh my God, I never thought about that, but that really intrigues me. That's what we're trying to do. So yes, it's all about those inquiry skills.
And I love to see it, and I think, hopefully we're not stopping here. I mean, having students passionate enough to come and talk to the school board is awesome, right? There's a great example of student agency. Thank you very much. Again, that's awesome. They're excited about whatever it is, and it drives them. And I think we can start to see that in other parts of the school. I hope inquiry is a great way of doing that. But we talked last meeting or 2 meetings ago about the idea of feedback and talking to the students and getting feedback from them, and then just empowering them to hear their voice rather than having them be passive people walking through the building. I think is an important step that I'm excited about the steps that we're taking here. Yeah, thank you.
I want to make sure that I thank Olivia and Emily, but also Kelsey Verville is also on the student government, and Joe Galantine are, and so their names are also attached to this letter. And when Mr. Grieve and I met with the student government back in January-ish, we had already been trying to do this work as a middle school. It cemented our decision to continue to move forward. And the student government students knew that although they would not benefit necessarily from this work, because they're 8th graders and moving on, they wanted to do their best that they could to try to make sure that this work could be done for the next generation of students that are going through. So they unselfishly put their thoughts together and knew that it would not benefit them, but it would benefit future generations in Deerfield. So thank you, girls, and to the student government.
Thank you.
It's huge. Our student government. Thank you, Mr. Motika.
Yes. All right.
Does anyone else need a projector?
No, but you can keep, is that your
My
plug
stuff.
too?
This is my
Okay.
stuff, yep.
And your dongle, you swear it's your
I
dongle.
brought the dongle.
Okay.
All right. So this brings us to,
Oh, I'm sorry, was that closed for comments and questions? I'm sorry, I didn't hear I just have can I ask a question?
sure.
I don't mean to stunt the work. I just want to point out there were 2 discrepancies between what was just presented and what was shared with the teachers yesterday. I don't know if that is worth saying or not, but I'm going to say so. One is that formatives can't be weighed in on ALMA. We were told yesterday that they would be, or at least that was the goal. And then at least the 8th grade team was told that the body of evidence is not ultimately the goal for us. So I
Not
just,
for next year.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
what we're working towards.
okay,
And that's a huge part of the progress moving forward. It's not for next year's work, it's going to be on assessments, but part of that will be building a body of evidence moving forward.
so is the reporting system changing for next year? That seems like a very elementary question, but
Numbers, across all assignments, truncated to the nearest decimal point, and adding the 0. Those are in.
okay, so your point about, I guess it goes back to what Mr. Oxnard said, so you said, so a child who's really close to a 3 will continue to get the same mark as a child who's not really close to a 3, there's not going to be any.
No, there's the decimal point, which will show at the 10th place.
That will show like an accumulative grade.
I think what we'll do is, the questions, because I think they're more for Chris than anything else, is I'll have you work with Chris on that offline so that we can keep working on the other stuff we have on the agenda, if that's okay. So if you want to corner Chris and pick his brain, I'd certainly encourage that. Okay. All right, so I added an item for the outdoor classrooms. I bumped into Jack Hutchinson within the last week or so. And we had a great conversation about how our outdoor classrooms have been used and the positive feedback that he's gotten, I think we've gotten, and I think consistently, I think we're all on the same page. The utilization's been excellent on those. And we talked about possibly building some more permanent structures that wouldn't need to be taken down for the winter, that would be able to be accessed all year long. And in talking to him, I said, so Jack, I said, sounds like you thought about this? What are you saying to me? I got an email the following morning, and he had priced out materials and came back to me and said, we're looking at basically about $4,000 per structure to create permanent structures that would fit into the same footprint. Very simple, posts, roof, maybe adding some benches. And then he proceeded to tell me that he thinks that he can get the volunteer help to build 2 of them this summer. And I most certainly don't want to discourage volunteers, and I also know that Jack is a force of nature, so if he gets behind it, let's let him go. So that being said, I think I'd like to make a motion that we approve an $8,000 expenditure for building materials to make 2 permanent outdoor classrooms.
Second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second.
I'm sorry, was that me second?
That was Nate seconded, I moved it. I did talk to Patty about whether or not we could possibly draw this out of our COVID grant money. And I think that's something that we're gonna look into. But I think we need to, regardless of whether or not it's COVID or regular fund balance at the moment, I think it's a project we should get behind and go forward with. So,
Can I ask a question?
go
Can I
ahead.
ask a question to our builder? So when I hear permanent structure, I'm wondering what that means, and if that means there needs to be an inspection or a
I can answer that.
permit, okay.
Well, it turns out that Jack was also back there with the building inspector discussing.
That makes me feel better.
Discussing all of that stuff. And so he and Rick Pelletier, part of the conversation was what Rick Pelletier wanted to see back there to make him comfortable with what we were doing.
Okay, good.
But effectively, we're talking pole barn style construction. It's gonna be sonotubes, pole roof. So, there you go.
Great.
Some other concerns I have are getting into like ADA concerns. Is that something if a physical structure goes in, I don't know if we would consider any of those sites ADA compliant back there? Is that something that we should be looking into? Do you know how that works?
Well, it's voluntary use, so if we supplied a classroom to a student and said, this is your classroom, oh, sorry, you can't get in, that's a problem. If we say, hey, if you want to go out and use these classrooms, it's an option. If you have someone in your class that can't access a certain space, then you shouldn't be using it.
And as I assume as a school, we're checking on that and classes aren't going out there or discriminating against our students, I assume.
The evidence that I've seen is Deerfield Community School finds a way for every student to access everything that they want, so
Excellent.
I'm not worried, yeah.
And I wouldn't want to just sort of go and do this without having teachers, interested. I assume based on like Jack was saying, talking about that and what we've heard, that the use has been, you said you've used the word phenomenal before, so I assume that that's, going to be true as well. Do you feel like there's a chance that they would still be used in the winter, or would we have to shovel a trail or something like that? Do you see that happening?
Snow plowing happened, like Chris planned all of the snow plowing around access to the outdoor classrooms, and kids just trample down the snow and go. There was no problem this year, there will not be a problem. I cannot see the classrooms stop, people stop using them, because we're at the pandemic. It's become part of the instructional methods and of the school.
Ultimately, I'd love to see this become something where every year we add 1 or 2 to the point where we get to that quantity that I think suits our needs, and I don't know what number that may be. It may be 6, and maybe it's 10, maybe it's 50 of them. But whatever that number is. I don't know what we would do with 50 of them, but
It's a good number.
it's a good number.
Good number, 50 is good.
You should see how big the fish I catch are. So, but I mean, ultimately, I think the utilization's been good, and I think it benefits the kids, and I think it can have a very positive impact on a lot of students that maybe aren't learning. I think it can have a positive impact on a lot of our kids. So, that being said, the motion's on the table or on the floor. Any other conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right. So that being said, because we are working with Jack, I will let him know, and then I will direct him to Trish to correct
Quickly.
that.
Smiling.
Okay, so I will let Jack know to talk with you, Trish, and then you can work with him on sourcing everything. Okay, so that's exciting stuff, that covers what I had there. Patty, we have a fiscal 21.
We do. So as of this afternoon, your balance was 907,000, and that is without the excess revenue, so that would add to the offset.
Sorry, I'm sorry, was it?
907, and that's not counting the extra, the IRS refund that you received. And Amber did mention that we do have some revenue coming in that hasn't been, uploaded, entered yet, so your revenues are looking okay from what she's seen. The lunch program is something that, is in flux, as we know. The reimbursements are coming in, but whether or not we're gonna get everything, or whether or not all the claims are going to go in for all of the free meals that we, gave out this year, there might be an offset included, in your budget before tax setting, we're not sure yet.
So as of earlier today, we're about 105 up from 2 weeks ago. We were 802 the last time.
Okay.
The last number you gave us was
I remember
802.
that.
Was, now that I have my hand behind it.
Yeah, and the books did close, or not, the books didn't close, the PO process, began on Friday of liquidating, so there will be a lot of POs that will be closed. If Trish hasn't already done them, there might be more freed up, in the next week or so.
Do you think
We started
that,
up, yeah.
you think that number, you're pretty confident that's numbers?
I think it would increase if anything.
I don't have any POs that will be created at all, so.
You have some outdoor classroom
You have
POs.
some outdoors, some carpet, some paint, some.
Well.
You wanna
I mean,
revisit
as
that,
far as
Susan? All right,
So,
well, that's, obviously, something good out of last year. Any questions regarding budget numbers or at least surplus? None? All right. PTO update. Are we PTO updating?
We can update you, sure.
You can, if you don't want to, you don't have to.
We'd love to,
You would.
yes.
I'd love an update.
I want to introduce our new president, Kelly
Yes.
Reardon. So we're really excited to have her.
El Presidente.
So she can give the update today, if you don't mind.
you can do the update, you do it.
Okay. So we're really excited, like we have a lot of veteran PTO members, as you probably know, so we're very excited to have some new people joining us so that we can get all that veteran knowledge before they move on and their kids graduate, because a few of them only have a year or two left. So the board is very new and we're really excited about going into the next school year and doing a lot of things. Hopefully we can do even more than before with, hopefully some things will ease with COVID and things like that. The ongoing fundraiser, as I mentioned before, is the sneakers. We also have the Name That Lane that just went out, so Libby Lane back here might have a new name. My daughter has her way, it's gonna be like Rainbow Unicorn Road or something like that. So hopefully at the next meeting, we'll be able to present to you the proposed names of that fundraiser. So I think that's it, so.
We're up to 15 members in a week and a half.
Very good. Excellent. Very good. Excellent. All right, well, thank you. And Kelly, I guess, congratulations on a bunch of additional work.
Is that vice president?
All right, any questions for the PTO? All right. Executive board?
No.
No meeting, okay. Ms. Withy,
Yes.
fire away.
All right, so this report covers May 20th till today, June 2nd. Our track and baseball and girls on the run continues at DCS. Today was the last baseball game, but I do believe there is another practice and a mini tournament. That's what Mr. Reed tells me. And the girls on the run will have their 5K on Saturday, June 12th from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock on the school grounds. They'll be using the outdoor school grounds. I want to make sure that I welcome Miss Stephanie Sims, S-I-M. She is a new 7th grade paraprofessional that just started this week, and we welcome her to the 7th grade team for the remainder of this school year. On Wednesday, May 26th, I don't know if you heard, but we had some snakes and some fox and some giant frogs on campus. Oh my, and they weren't in the pond out there. They are our 3rd grade teachers planned an in-house field trip for the 3rd graders. So Wildlife Encounters was here they did a presentation outside in the front, on the front lawn up there, and it was great. The kids loved it. Some people ran the other way when the snake came out, and some people ran to the snake. So it was very interesting to see how different people react when strange animals are visiting your school. We are deep into the placement process. Students will know their classroom teacher 1st through 5th grade before the end of the school year. It will be on their report cards. And our 6th and 7th graders will have their homeroom teachers before they leave this building on the last day of school. We are planning to have a step up for our 5th through 7th grade so that they can find their way to their classrooms and they know who their homeroom teacher is going into the summer. And then over the summer, we'll work on putting advisories together. We are planning to do magnet a little differently. Usually for the past several years, they've chosen their magnet before the end of the school year. And going to a straight grading system with 7th grade and 8th grade, the 8th grade teachers don't know the 7th grade kids as well, so they want to start off the school year doing middle school. We're going to do a sort of a middle school boot camp where we work with the kids on understanding Alma, the new number system, Google Classroom, where do you find feedback, all the important things that middle schoolers know how to do. We just want to remind them that they know how to do them. And one of the suggestions that we are taking into consideration is that 8th grade will spend that first month figuring out which magnet they want to be part of and going through that whole process. So by the end of September, they will have chosen their magnets, and then we'll start we'll start magnets at the end of the month. We'll start the year off right away with our advisories in 6th grade, 7th grade.
Sort of, yeah.
So, Mr. Creep says sort of, so if he says sort of, then I say sort of too. We welcomed our, yes?
I think I vaguely remember asking this question last time, so forgive me if I did, but for the step-up day in the middle school, you're gonna reach out to the remote 5th
Yes.
grade kids so that they're invited first again. Thank you.
And we welcomed our newest dragons to school today. We had a kindergarten visitation. It's the first time that we have had outside visitors at besides the high school presentation that you had done or school board meetings. But the kindergarten teachers really wanted to do something in person, and so we decided to, every Wednesday, as you know, we do Professional Development Wednesday where teachers do stay after school for that from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And so we made the whole plan to have them come today. We had, almost everybody was here. Almost every student that is coming to kindergarten in the fall was here. And they came in bravely and they sat in the gym. We had I call it the cafeteria, gymnasium. But that's where it was. The kindergarten teachers did a very nice little introduction. We have a slideshow going that we will put up on the DCS website for them, which has information about things you can do over the summer and what a typical day looks like and what are some skills you can work on over the summer to make sure your child is ready for kindergarten. And here are some pictures of the kindergarten. So then the kindergarten teachers took 3 small groups out to the playground area and rotated around. They would play with some of the equipment. On the small one, they played with some sidewalk chalk, and they had the playground balls and jump ropes and hula hoops out. So they had 3 separate groups. The teachers got to spend some time with the kids. while the parents stayed with us and got introduced to administration, got introduced to our librarian, got introduced to reading specialist, math specialist, so we gave them a little rundown of our school, then gave them a tour of the kindergarten area, the kindergarten classrooms. And also when the kindergarten kids went outside, the teachers walked them by the classroom so that they could peek inside and see them. So it was great to have them. I think we only had a few tears, but it was rushed along. Those tears, and they forgot all about it when they got outside.
I can't believe you cried.
I know, it was so embarrassing.
Ryan, thank you for rushing that. How many?
What's that?
How many kids?
We currently are at 47. Still sitting at 47.
Okay,
So we're still planning for 3.
for 3. What's our break is what, around 55?
Mr. Weaver says that 55 is the magic number.
Okay.
And then we pivot to 4.
Good.
Pivot.
Good. All right.
So that kind of wraps up what we've been doing around here, but some upcoming events that, to note, I know we've mentioned a few times, but make sure that we mention, again, the 8th grade field trips are next week. So our 8th graders on Monday will be visiting Mount Piper, which is on the backside of Gunstock. I'm not a hiker, so I've heard it's on the backside of Gunstock. And it's supposed to be a nice hot 95 degrees on Monday, so, but the kids will, they enjoy mountain climbing, so it'll be a great day. Wednesday is going to be a magnet day here on the school grounds, and the teachers are working on planning those activities, and then on Friday is the big trip to Six Flags. So they'll be gone for the whole day, come back late at night, you have the buses ready to go, the charter buses ready to go to pick them up. Our 8th grade semi-formal is coming along nicely. We have a wonderful group of 8th grade parents that are putting it together. That will be Saturday, June 12th from 6 to 9. Our 8th grade graduation, as a reminder, is Monday, June 14th. And our 8th graders have no school on Friday, June 15th, but we have school on Friday, June 15th, the rest of us, K through 7. And just a reminder, it's a full day of school. In the past, it's been a half day, but the last day of school is a full day of school. Next week, our 7th graders will be taking a trip as well. Next Friday, they're going to be going to Mount Major, climbing Mount Major. And on that day, our K to 5 kids will have a field day. Mr. West and Mrs. Lance are planning a field day for our little guys in the morning and our older elementary kids in the afternoon. And then the last thing speaking of outdoor classroom, Mrs. Hanson and some of the teachers and Jack are working on an open house for our outdoor classrooms. The details are still being put together, but we're thinking about Friday, June 11th from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And having just a drop in for all of our awesome volunteers that we have, thanking our monetary donors that we've had. And just a drop-in style, give them a tour of the outdoor classroom so they can see them. And the teachers are gonna, keep it set up for whatever they go out during the day. We're just gonna keep them set up for the day with the whiteboards out and the seats and maybe a fire. I don't know. I think we should have a fire. It's part of the whole process, it's part of the whole experience. So that is happening. We're thinking Friday, June 11th, but like I said, more details will be coming out. Ms. Hanson and Ms. Laskowski are the brains behind that. So as soon as we have information, we'll get that out to you.
Awesome. Any questions for Principal Woodley? Awesome, all right. CRB, Gigi's not here, and I think we pretty well covered anything involving that.
Yeah.
Okay. Did not meet. Jeffrey, on the high school, on the building expansion.
Finally.
You wanna talk about the high school too, you can.
Yeah, it's phase 2. No, we finally got our contract back. Amber's reviewing it. When she is done putting her eyes on it, she's gonna send it to the committee for all of us to just review. And then I'm gonna try and get this thing rolling. The contract kind of slowed us up, so get a push.
Lost about a month?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Do you think we can pick that time back up?
We're gonna try.
All right. What else you got?
That's it.
That's it, all right. Any questions for Jeff? All right. Nate, High School Options Committee.
Yes, we met last night and had a draft of some metrics. We were looking at about 6 or 7 different metrics that we settled on as being more important ways of assessing different, we had a list of 12 high schools that expressed interest after we contacted them. Either the space or the space to either fit some or all of our students, and so we needed to narrow that down to a more equal number. We wanted to present the idea to the board so that we could essentially have the board's approval moving forward with this list of 6 schools. And I don't have, I wasn't able to upload or provide the spreadsheet in time with the 6, but I could list off the different traits we were looking at, and I can also give you the names of the schools. We were looking at evaluating things, primarily distance was from our survey, was one of the biggest drivers of concern that came out of our survey from parents. Cost is going to be an unavoidable factor, so we factored those in. We did look at academic scores of these 12 different schools. We looked at career tech and availability, so different opportunities such as we heard last week from last meeting from the CRTC. We also looked at faculty and their certifications, and if were any schools unable to fully staff with completely certified teachers, those kinds of concerns or data maybe raised some concerns from different schools. And we weighted them all in such a way that we were able to narrow, like I said, our 12 schools down to 6. And the 6 schools we're looking at and we'd like to propose and see if we can have the board on agreeing with our moving ahead with this. Are Bow, Co-Brown, Concord, Dover, Pembroke, and Pinkerton. And again, based on distance, based on cost, based on academics, based on career tech opportunities, certifications of faculty, a range of concerns that we thought were rising to the top in terms of being most important. Questions?
I would say as far as like looking for the board to make it say like, yeah, I'm good with this. I personally haven't done any of the work or digging into it, so I would say my response would be that I trust the committee, and you're the ones with the information, and you're ultimately gonna bring us your suggestion and recommendation, and obviously the defense behind it. So to that point, I would say.
Great, thank you. And I'll make sure the next meeting we have that spreadsheet, so we'll see the data, the breakdown.
So what do you think, so we're down to 6, what do you think we're looking at for a timeline, from when do we need, working backwards from when we need to make a decision to where we are now?
If we are, our goal has been stated in our meeting, and we're sticking to it as much as possible, of getting an actual contract negotiated and on to the March warrant, then that means we need to have some final language in the negotiation by November-ish.
So, I mean, realistically, we have to have warrants done in December, right, Patty? So, contract negotiations will take 2 months, 3 months, all of that. So, I mean,
It depends, but yeah, and school visits and.
So we're probably looking like August. The board really needs to get into this pretty hard and heavy on the negotiation side. Is that a fair?
And that was the last point I was gonna make, was that I was gonna ask Patty how we can start to contact these 6 schools and say, probably 2 or 3 people would be interested in tour. We were thinking maybe if we can contact the schools and say what times are good for you, probably waiting until, given that we haven't had anybody in our building, probably schools aren't gonna be racing to let us in. And so waiting till after school's over may make more sense, also for people's schedules and things like that. So that'll give us a couple weeks to contact them and to maybe find times that work for their schedules. And if we can have a few of those possibilities, then our committee can kind of line up what times work for them.
So just, maybe Jeff's on his way there, but I'm trying to think time-wise. Your committee, or the high school committee, are you thinking you're gonna wrap everything up July 2nd meeting, we're hearing from that committee as a board?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we started this thing, we're not saying that the committee is gonna be, the ones making the recommendation, that we wanna be working with the board as much as possible. So collaborating is obviously keeping that in mind, but yes, I think our conversation, and if we need to make a formal recommendation, we can do that, but things that we've been talking about are that clear response from the community said, that choice is what people want for the most part. There's a very small number who just want one school on principle, not based on cost, right? Just will have one school on principle, but by and large, all of the respondents want choice. And so it sounds like we're leaning towards, as a committee, trying to find a way, are there a few schools that we can, different people in different parts of the town would be interested in going to these 3 or 4 or whatever, how many different schools. The only reason we see as a committee not ending up with that model is cost, and so that's kind of where we end up getting into the negotiation part of it. But I think if we were to come back and kind of say, if we can get as many schools on board, that'd be great, and then hand it off. Does the committee need to narrow it down to 3 schools, or after visits, we should have some more information and we could do that, but we don't want the committee to be making up, this is the
Right.
recommendation, so.
Okay.
That's kind of where we stand. I don't know.
Patty?
I think it's really, it's admirable, but also very ambitious to think that this is all gonna be wrapped up in November.
Oh, now you set a challenge for
I was part of
Somebody get the mic.
I was part of the process the last time around and trying to negotiate and set up meetings with all of the involved parties, and it's very time consuming, and it's not all within our control. I guess, not that we can pull it off, but it's not all within our control, and legal counsel does recommend that the State Board of Education approve the contract before it goes to the voters.
Could we have a
Because-
special meeting if we had to discuss that? No, it has to be on the warrant, but we can't have a special meeting.
Well, you can have a forum.
No, but I'm saying if we couldn't get the contract on
Oh,
the warrant.
to
have a-
ask-
If we miss March,
Yeah,
could
you'd have
we
to-
do it in May if we wanted to?
Well, I mean,
No, you'd have to petition a judge, and it would have to be a pretty
well,
serious reason other than,
just asking.
you
So-
can always ask.
So what you're saying is you just challenged us to get this done
It's a
by
challenge,
November?
it is a challenge, for sure.
So, yeah, because we're June 2nd,
Yeah,
and we've got, if we wait till the end of school, start touring schools, that's gonna be mid-June.
/ early July.
By the time they're scheduled.
And so we're gonna meet with the committee probably that second weekend in July.
Yeah, so the other question is maybe, I'm floating this as much to you, Nate, is if we're gonna set up visits with 6 schools, should we include the ability for the body of the board to participate so that we're double dipping on the walkthroughs? We have to post it as a meeting, I guess, in that case, or is that?
I think the other thing you could do is invite administrators from the schools to come and talk to the board at one of your meetings. You could
Similar, have them do a presentation similar like Concord did.
sort of talk to you about their offerings and their co-curricular activities and their, an opportunity for you to get a flavor for the schools, for the whole board. It's,
The visits we can do in small groups, we can get all 6 of them done in 2 weeks, I think.
Okay.
But to have 6 schools, well, 5, not taking out Concord, to have 5 come and present to this board is gonna be one long meeting, or else.
oh, yeah, wouldn't be, it couldn't be
Or else
nice.
it'd be 5 meetings, which is gonna be even longer.
We did, I'm trying to remember how many we had, because we did have different schools come to one of the forums.
Mhm.
I can't remember how many at that point we were down to.
So it sounds like for right now, let's see if we can knock out at the end of June.
And maybe the committee narrows the list down a little bit more.
It tightens it up maybe a hair, and then we dive in and try to beat Patty's timeline.
I like it.
All right. Anything else for Nate?
Do you contact the superintendent first to say that we're interested?
That probably makes sense, yes. Maybe you and I can figure out the logistics.
Okay. All right, thank you. Actually, I did send that, I just got an email back from Superintendent Murphy of Concord, and she has forwarded the survey on to Concord students, so we should be getting those results in the next week or so.
Awesome.
From current and recent Concord students through Concord rather than through Facebook, which I think is more reliable.
Excellent. All right. Anything else?
Unrelated, didn't make the agenda, I didn't bring it up during the agenda review, but I had a couple of things that I wanted to discuss with the group and see what the thoughts were. They have to do with end of year events. The first is the semi-formal and then the other is the graduation. I wanted to explore what the board and the administration's thoughts would be on optional masks, because those events are limited in nature and who can attend. And it would be a good kind of send off to the students.
All right. Let's hash it out. Any feedback? It's nice to see your face, Nate.
We wanna ask,
I think that's where I'm
what
looking
the plan
first.
is at this point.
So at the semi-formal, as you know, it's at the Sheep Barn, there's two buildings, it's at the smaller of the two buildings. And we're looking to conduct as much of the party, or I guess dance outside try to do as much outside as possible. So if that is the case, we would kind of relax the mask use, as long as kids are not on top of each other, which they shouldn't be. We're gonna have like cornhole and games like that, so they should be spread out a little bit. We'll be supplying food, so we will have, these tables are actually being brought over, so they will be 6 feet apart while eating. If it happens to move into the Sheep Barn, if it's raining or for whatever reason, we would have to have, like we said as administration, we would have masks back on, except for when eating, again, 6 foot distance when we're eating. And then for the graduation, we're looking at around 300 people, distance. So essentially, every family is getting 4 tickets, and they're getting 4 seats essentially, and those 4 seats are then 3 feet apart from the other groups. So roughly around 300 people, with students, the band, staff, any of you guys who are coming. So we said that given the circumstances, masks should probably be worn by everybody in attendance. We did talk about having students, when they're coming up to receive their diploma, and for those who don't know, students come up and we do a quick speech about them, and highlighting some of their, some events or accomplishments that they have had. So we would allow them to take off their masks for picture purposes and receiving their diploma from Patty and Zach. And then when they return to their seat, they would put their mask back on. So that's where we, as an administration, talked about and what we saw as finding that compromise, because it is still a school-sponsored event. We still are requiring all students, regardless of if they're not mingling, but they still have their mask on at recess and things of that nature, so.
And this is inside, is that correct? Is it planning? I know that, I heard what you said about the social.
The graduation?
Yeah,
The graduation is in the larger Sheep
in
Barn.
the larger sheep barn,
Yeah.
the dance in the smaller sheep barn?
Yes, correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
What's the feedback maybe from other schools in our SAU, or where do we stand in relation to what they're doing?
Other schools in the SAU, to my understanding, are not relaxing the mask requirement through the end of the school year. We started talking about it at Pembroke Academy with the summer programs that happen outside, having fully vaccinated students at that age level, able to have masks be optional, just like the CDC guidelines are right now. Masks are being required at prom. The kids are gonna be outside and 6 feet when they're eating, and then other than that, they're gonna be wearing masks, so I don't.
I'm thinking when my daughter goes to her prom, I'm gonna require a mask, but that's different. I had to, good opportunity. I guess ultimately, Andy, if you wanna float a motion, fire it and we'll go from there.
Well, it sounds like there's gonna be some flexibility with the semi-formal if it's outside. I mean, I think at school, masks are worn outside, or are they not?
They are, yeah, for recess, yeah.
But
I mean, we
they-
do have kids take mask breaks, but again, they're away from each other and they're not on top of each other, so.
I mean, we're definitely on the home stretch right now. We've got 10 school days left.
Mhm.
I mean, if we still had 3 months to go, I'd probably really wanna dive into the idea of easing up a little bit as far as here, right? But we've got a 10-day stretch to make it, we've made it this far. As far as, you know, the outside of the building activities, I'd probably favor a more flexible approach in that case, even if it's just for the students and not necessarily for the adults, but.
We still have cases on a pretty regular basis, and we're still having to quarantine, and I would feel horrible if something happened at an event and then students were quarantined. That was my other thought about that.
That's fair.
You good?
Yeah.
All right. Where's that bring us? That brings us to, policies. A lot of first readings. Patty, you wanna?
Sure, so Andy's been generous enough with his time to start going through the policies, helping us bring to our attention some that are really outdated, and has offered to start doing some editing for us. Found a couple that were sort of half done and never finished, and a couple of duplicates, so Kathy's been very appreciative because it's a really overwhelming process, to try and get all the board's policies up to date. So, I would just mention tonight that we did not have a chance as a leadership team, it's been a little busy, to do those 2/3 readings, so we are intending, we're gonna give it the try again on Friday morning to look at those. Last Friday, or the Friday before, we got sidetracked with a lot of other business. So those are not ready for this evening, and then I'm not sure if Andy has had a chance to look at or has any comments on any of the policies that he's been looking at, but they're on for first reading, so there's nothing required for tonight.
I think the only one that's actionable at the moment, unless you have comments, is GCF, and that's to withdraw that.
Withdraw, yeah.
That would be the hiring of staff policy.
Yep.
And we are withdrawing that because.
There's-
No one in 2007.
Yeah, and there is no school board policy. I think that, I'm not sure, for whatever reason, that was put in place. I know there were some issues with budget and hiring, at that one point in time, and I guess it just got left.
All right, so I'd look for a motion to withdraw policy GCF, the hiring of staff.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jeff, seconded by Nate for the withdrawal. Any additional conversation? All in favor? Aye, it's gone. All right. Anything else on policy? Are we pushing everything forward to the next meeting?
Yep.
Okay. We didn't have anything for informational?
Yep.
Right?
Sorry,
We do?
the question about the live stream,
Oh, right.
can you just clarify what needs to happen so we can do that for next meeting?
Right, so if, we have the ability now, if you wanted to live stream your meetings, we could provide a link to the public to access the meeting and watch live from home, or, or we will continue to record and post the recordings. It will take some work, but if the board is interested in live streaming, we can look into figuring out how to make that happen.
So as a live stream, is that through like a YouTube type app?
Yep.
So it's watch only
Correct,
with closed captioning?
correct.
But we don't have any concerns about, people that are watching. That's not considered the avenue to attend the meeting. So we don't have to be able, they don't have to be able to communicate.
That's
back to
right,
us.
that's right. Yep, if you want to make comments or participate in any way, you would still need to be in attendance. But it would give you the opportunity, almost like, towns that have a TV channel or to broadcast, people can watch from home.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
We'll figure out if we can, experiment our way through it.
Yeah, we'll give it a try, and, I mean,
I
worst
think
case scenario, it doesn't work, and we try it again the next meeting.
Yeah.
You're recording it either way in that.
Yeah, we are
Yeah,
recording.
it anyway, yeah.
And then,
I was gonna say, is the amount of work such that it would make more sense to wait till school ends and then deal with it? Like, I don't know how much work it is, but I like the idea, but I'm happy to wait till after school ends also.
I mean, we can look into it and talk to Brooke and see if it's gonna take,
I think
it's pretty busy right now, so it's gonna take work, we can wait,
I'd
but.
say we'll throw it back to you guys then, if you think you can do it, great. If you need to hold until we get through the end of the year,
I think it's ready to go, just we need to make sure that the link going and figure that
How that
out.
works. Because I know in Pembroke, we schedule it as a WebEx and then we just send the link out and somebody logs into the meeting, at the meeting. But if Brooke has a way to just do it through the school channel, that would be much easier.
I think that's what
Yeah.
she's going for.
Yeah.
My only fear, and I saw this when, fall, I guess it was back in the fall or back over the summer last year, is watching when some towns around us were streaming. And they were streaming their remote meetings, and then you had these vicious conversations occurring on the feed from the public.
Oh, right, to shut down.
Commenting.
Yeah, that's what I don't wanna see occur. So if it's a watch only, right? But what I don't wanna see is
Community members.
community
yeah.
members starting to attack staff and administration about decisions, and it was probably would have been more prevalent back then, because nobody liked any decision that anybody was making. But I'm not interested in creating a situation where our staff, or, if you disagree with what, the actions of the board are at a meeting, tell the board, but don't just sit there and wail away on the staff and the administrators for no reason, because you're tough with the keyboard. So that's why I wanna make sure it's a one-way feed.
Yeah, and we can look into that as well. Yep.
All right, anything else? Okay, public comments. Do we have any public comments? Ms. Baker?
I'm just gonna take my mask off, so I'm so far back, but, so you can hear me. I don't really have any, nothing huge, but I just wanted to say on the high school options, well, first I just wanted to say, it sounds like we don't need a building committee anymore if we're expanding the outdoor classrooms, so Jeff, I think you're good.
Hey, and we did it for $8,000.
But on the high school options, I just wanna say, like, it sounds, the timeline is very aggressive, and 6 schools is a lot, and to visit and to coordinate schedules, so I guess I would just, suggest to not forget about virtual meetings and using that avenue. It's worked out really well, I think, this year with keeping things moving, so I guess I wouldn't discount that and just use it as much as you possibly can to be able to stick to that timeline, just because it seems like people are much more amenable to doing virtual meetings than they've ever been in the past, so.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, all right. For NHRSA 91-832, small letters B and C, I look for a motion going to non-public. Moved by Jeff Bailey, seconded by Nate Oxnard, requires a roll call around the room. Andy?
Yep.
Nate?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Myself, yes. It is 7:59 and we are going to non-public. Thank you, folks, for attending.
You sniped it, it was 7:59:00.